Hello, everybody. Just waiting for some numbers to go up at the moment. So hello, my name's Mark Smith. I'm a developer advocate at MongoDB. I've been a Python developer for around 23 years. I'm based in Edinburgh in Scotland. It's quite cold here right now, and I'm really feeling it because I'm having the boiler replaced on my house. So I don't know what temperature my house looks like right now, but it's pretty cold. And what else? What else about me? I'm currently building an ODM, an object document mapper for MongoDB. There are a few object document mappers for MongoDB already. Things like ODMantic, Beanie, Mongoose for JavaScript. There's a bunch out there, and they all take kind of a similar approach to mapping. They kind of borrow from object relational mappers that are designed for relational databases, and kind of more accurately, they tend to go for they tend to implement the active record pattern, where you've kind of got one object that usually maps to a row in a table, and then it might pull in things like sort of sub arrays or other embedded documents from other related tables. I don't feel like that's quite so useful with MongoDB. I feel like modeling in MongoDB, there's some subtlety to it because MongoDB has the document model, obviously, where you can embed objects or sub-documents inside your document. You can embed arrays. It's all, if you're used to working with JSON documents, you know, it's pretty familiar. Although it's actually more powerful than JSON because we have things like native big floating point types, accurate floating point types for dealing with financial data. We've got native date time types. We've got binary types for storing sort of binary data in your document. So, but if you want your database to scale, if you want it to be really performant, you need to think about how you're accessing your data. So the sort of the magic message that we tend to repeat again and again when we're doing webinars and we're doing these streams is to say that data that's accessed together should be stored together. And this really talks about like the fact that you can embed related data within your document, and if you can, you probably should. But there's more subtlety to it than that. So sometimes if your request, let's say you've got a well, let's have a look at some data. Hey, Anjay, good to see that you made it. It's always good to see a friendly face on stream. Anjay's been here for a couple of the other streams that I've done. So obviously looking forward to the next part. I didn't quite get everything I wanted done last week, so this is kind of a catch-up episode. Let's actually have a look at some data, and then I won't need to sort of do hand-wavy stuff when talking about the subset pattern, which is what I'm going to be implementing today. So what I'm really trying to do with my ODM library is to abstract out some common data modeling patterns that we've identified. If you're interested in data modeling in MongoDB, there's a link in the description to a sort of a top level document that describes some of the design patterns that we've identified in the past. And if you haven't ever seen that before, you should definitely go and have a look. That link is probably the most important link on the whole MongoDB website. If you ask me, I've been looking up documentation, as you can see. There's MongoDB documentation. I use it all the time, so I certainly haven't memorized all of MongoDB in the 4 years I've been working here as developer advocate. So last week I introduced a kind of toy application that's a sort of Twitter or X clone or a Blue Sky clone called Y. I thought that was a funny name. It's a bit of a pun. And at the moment, all I'm modeling is profiles and followers. So the top level objects we have are kind of these documents that represent a member of a person on the website, a user account, and it's got some useful information in there. And I've designed this ODM that can abstract out some of this information. And so abstraction can take many different forms. You can change the structure of the data, or even just some simple low-level stuff. I can map types. So the user ID, you'll notice, is a string. That may not be something that the application expects because it's numeric but it's stored in a string. So we may want to convert that to an integer, for example. And I have designed, I'm trying to think where I actually designed this. Oh, this is in the examples folder, which I don't think I pushed to GitHub, but I really should. I'll do that after this live stream. So I'm just building a basic fast API server. Builds JSON documents, so it allows you to request field profiles from the user. So there's our profiles endpoint. What I've done here, though, is I've used, this is using the ODM library that I've built over the last 3 weeks, and you can see that I've got I'm defining these fields. So I've got a document that I'm subclassing for a follower, and I've got an underscore ID field. And I'm just saying I want to transform that as a string. And that then means that if I wrap this around a BSON document, then when it does a lookup, it's going to run it through the string converter. The string, this is just the core Python stir function, which takes an object and returns the string representation of it. So usually it calls dunder stir on the underlying object. And that works for us. That works for an object ID. So it's converting the subject ID to a string. I can also do renaming. So if I wanted this attribute to be called ID, I could then, I've got a parameter in here called field name. And I can say, well, okay, the underlying field is called underscore ID, but I want to access it as the ID attribute. So there's some relatively simple stuff here. If you've used Django models, or I think even things like SQL Alchemy or Beanie, any of the existing ODMs, some of this will seem familiar. And I definitely want to implement all that kind of core functionality of almost like defining a schema in a top level document, but that isn't as far as I want to go. I want to go further and do these sort of transformations that allow you to do extra lookups in the background, and transform, provide a different view on the data within the sort of data access layer of my application. So that's kind of where I am so far. Last week, I implemented the sequence field. Sequence field works in the same way as the field type, but it wraps a sequence and it applies a transformation to every item in that sequence. So in this case, I'm saying my followers attribute, which I haven't overridden that. So that just maps directly to the followers field in the wrapped document, is a sequence. And I want to call follower and pass it the subdocument for each item in that array. So hopefully well, we got this working at the very last second, because I was having some trouble at the last minute last week. We were doing some print line debugging, which is the worst kind of debugging. But I'm a little bit rusty on PDB. I have to brush up on that. I'm not sure brushing up on that on a live stream with an audience is the most comfortable thing, but maybe people can help me out if I have to do that this week. So I want to take this further. So the thing that I'm actually modeling, if we go back to my browser, the thing that I'm actually modeling is these followers. So the idea is that if I'm looking up a profile, it may just show the top 10, top 20 followers on that page. So in that case, I probably only want to embed those top 20 followers in an array. Now, this user, Patrick or Daniel, this is just generated data, so none of this makes any sense. Or M. Myers. I wish it could create a person and then create associated email addresses and names and things. That was Faker. I created all this data with Faker. So anyway, I've got this person only has 8 followers. So I just embedded so a subset of each of those followers' data in here. So it's not a full profile. It doesn't include birth date because you're not going to display that on the page, but it has got user ID and it might have a link to an avatar or something like that. Hey, Pavan, good to have you here. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. I don't know if you're new. I haven't seen your name crop up before. So welcome to the stream if you are new. I'm just kind of covering what I've done over the last 2 or 3 weeks, so that we can kind of start moving forwards. I'm trying to do it as quickly as possible, but also trying to make sense. And those two things pull against each other. So I'm doing my best. If anything doesn't make sense, feel free to drop a question in the chat. That's what it's there for. I do try to keep an eye on it while I'm wishing. So this person only has 8 followers, so there are only 8 followers in this array, 0 to 7. But some of them will have hundreds or maybe thousands of followers. There's a rule, not a rule, sorry, a guideline when modeling in MongoDB that if you've got an array, you should only have around a maximum of 200 items in that array. It's not a strict limit. You could have more if you wanted to, but for performance reasons, you should try to restrict arrays to under 200. Now, 200 is quite a big number, and it's awkward to work with. So I'm actually working with a fictional limit that's much smaller than that. I have said every array in this application should have 20 items instead of 200. That means that I can expand it, and you can see all the items on one page. So this person, although we only have an array of 20 followers here, the follower count says that there are 59. So where are the other 39 followers? Well, because, oops, I'm pressing escape, but it's not doing anything, which is not very helpful. And while we're talking about this, I'm gonna show you, given this is a nice informal live stream, I'm going to show you my escape key on my keyboard because it's new. So I don't know if you can see that green button there. I have a MongoDB escape key on my keyboard now. We were giving them away to attendees at reInvent in Vegas 2 weeks ago, and I got a colleague to bring one back for me. So I'm quite pleased. Sadly, it doesn't seem to be working. So I'm just going to have to. I'm going to refresh, and then we have to wait for the data to load again. I have some more keys as well. I got 4, and 2 of them are these cool brackets. So they're sort of following all our design branding guidelines at MongoDB. And so I've got these 2 brackets, and I wanted to put them and replace my bracket keys with them. But the problem is they're not opposing brackets. They're both the same key. So if I turn it upside down, you know, they're slightly wonky. So they don't really fit as matching bracket keys. So I think it's kind of a shame. But we have a lot of mechanical keyboards fans at MongoDB. Maybe we can go and have a word with the people who get our swag printed and see if we can get that fixed. Right. So. Back to data, I was looking at item 4 is the one that I've been working with. So I've got 20 here. As I said, there are some more followers, and we map those other followers into a different collection. That's what I'm doing at the moment. You can store them in the same collection if you want to. Sometimes you'd have like overflow documents. So you'd have the main profile in a first document, and then you'd have some subsequent documents with just extra followers, or whatever data that's overflowing from the original document. But it's actually simpler from a query perspective to keep it in a separate collection, so that I can just look up all the followers with user ID 4. So this is the user ID in the profiles collection. And then this is the next 20, and then there should be, yes, there's another document for the followers of 4, and that just has 19 in there. So that makes us up to 39, which is kind of good. So these are bucketed, you'll notice. So I've got, this is an array. I could have each of these followers could have their own document in here, but when it's relatively small data like this, it can be more efficient from an indexing point of view to just keep them bucketed together, because you're usually going to load them one page at a time anyway. So that's how I've chosen to model this data. But we always have options with trade-offs in MongoDB. Right, so that's the problem. I mean, it's not really a problem, it's a solution. It's a scaling and performance solution. But what I want to do is map that here transparently, so that the first 20 followers will come from this followers embedded field. And then it will, after that, if you keep looping after that point, it will then look up some extra data using either a find query or an aggregation pipeline. So let's get started. There's a thing I changed last week, I think. So I'm going to go back to my .bridge library. Excuse me, I have too many files open. Just been making sure I've got a relatively clean environment for working. working here. It's on the left-hand side anyway. So here we go. This is my DocBridge library. I have added some documentation, which is always good. It's not great documentation, but it will do the job. And I've described at least each of the classes at the top level. And then we've got our sequence field, which is the thing that I'm working with today. And at the moment, when you look something up, it returns a list comprehension. So it's actually a list, and it's just applying this type, this transformer to each item in the underlying array. So underscore doc is the wrapped BSON document. And then we just look it up by field name, which is stored away here. And in fact, it's occurred to me, field name none, field name. And then just checking that everything's working as it should do, because like some of this was a little bit disconnected last week. So what I want to do is I kind of want to return twice here, or at least I want to return two sequences. The first one doesn't have to be lazy. I'm probably going to make it lazy, at least in a way. And then I want to sort of append this lazy sequence after this one, which is going to do a lookup. I keep saying lookup. Lookup is an aggregation pipeline stage in MongoDB, and I'm not actually doing a lookup. All I'm doing is a query and applying a filter data to it from the original profile or document to kind of look up the data, the subset of data that I'm interested in. I'm going to need two things. So to run a query in MongoDB, we need two things. We need the collection that we want to run the query on against. So that would be, what do we call this? I'm going to call it, for want of a better name, I'm going to call it superset. Superset collection and superset query. So this is the collection I'm going to run the query on, and this is the actual query I'm going to run against the collection. I'm going to put a comma on the end, so now we haven't got such a long line. And then I'm just going to store each one of those away. Superset collection, self.superset. Why isn't it not? Oh, it auto completed the last one, but it's not doing it here. Oop. Now it is. There we go. So I'm just storing those away. And then what happens is when I return the data, so this is a descriptor. This function is called, instead of just returning the attribute, it calls this function and returns whatever's returned from the function. It's pretty cool. I love descriptors. Ever since I first learned, I think I went digging in the Django source code a very long time ago to work out how it worked, and I ended up learning about descriptors and metaclasses. Fortunately, these days you don't need metaclasses to do most of the stuff that Django does. Because, for example, we have set name here that is called by the containing class when an attribute is kind of connected to its containing class, and it gives you the containing class and the name of the attribute that's been stored away. So I can then, anyway, you used to need metaclasses for this. It used to have to loop through all the attributes and kind of glue them together, but now we don't have to do that. So if I want to have one iterator kind of following another one, there is a neat way to do that, which is to use itertools. If you don't use itertools, you should use itertools. It's probably my favorite core module in Python. So I'm going to hij itertools import. You know, that typo I do a lot. Anyway, chain. So chain takes a series of iterables, and then it will exhaust the first iterable, and then once that happens, it will then start sending back the items from the second iterable. So this actually works quite nicely with the fact that PyMongo has lazy queries. So something that may not be immediately obvious, even if you've been using MongoDB for a while, is when you call find on a collection or you call aggregate on a collection, it literally does nothing It doesn't connect to the server. It doesn't prepare the query. It doesn't do anything. It's just essentially wraps that query and waits for you to start iterating through the result. Only at the point where you call next on the cursor that's returned, only at that point does it execute the query against the server and start sending you batches of data back, usually in, I think, about 100 documents. 100 document pages, and then once you get through the first 100, it then requests the next page of documents, and this all happens under the hood. There's actually a lot happening in PyMongo under the hood, but anyway, the point is, a cursor is a lazy iterator, and so that's quite handy because we can just kind of attach it. We can call chain here and just attach. Superset is the wrong word because superset contains the subset, but it's kind of the following set. I'll work that out later. This is all better. Like, naming things is hard, and I find it easier kind of when I get a chance to properly think about it. If anybody has any suggestions, feel free to stick it in the chat. Always happy for some user input. So I'm going to have my, I'm just going to call this superset, given that we've got a name, might as well use it consistently. So I haven't actually created a superset yet, but this is going to be a second lazy iterator. So there's kind of 3 scenarios here for the superset. So if self.superset, I'm going to test it on query instead of collection. Don't know why, but if it's none, so they haven't provided a query, then the superset is just going to be empty. And I just need to provide an iterable, so I can just provide an empty, make it an empty list. Then there are 2 options. So queries in MongoDB can be either find queries, sort of it's a more limited sort of subset of query functionality, but a little bit easier to use, or aggregation pipelines. They're essentially calls to aggregate. Those are sequences. So the first one takes a map or an object in MongoDB terms, or a document, I suppose. And the second one takes a sequence. So that's how we can tell what type of query they've set, and we can support both of them, which is quite nice. So one of the things, so if elif self.superset query is a, if, let's see what's, so maps are also iterables. So I'm going to check for the mapping first. And the way that I can do that is instance, and then I can, pass it mapping here. And the reason I've done this, mapping is an abstract base class. It's provided by typing these days. There have been other ways to do it in the past, but I think mapping in typing is probably the best way to do that. I've also got actually list and sequence, which I can't remember if I'm using list now, but anyway, I actually want iterable, or maybe iterator. I think I want iterator actually. So see, I was testing this earlier. Let's have a look in Python. Is in from typing import iterator. Was it iterator? Yeah, it was iterator. And then is instance iterator. Oh, that's not so good. And I'm betting if I call iter on that, then that's kind of annoying. Well, how did I do this earlier? Yeah, iterable. So where did I get iterable from? From typing import iterable. Okay, this is literally just, I don't know what's going on this machine, but I don't always get the auto completion that I want. So there we go. Iterable is in there, and that then gives me what I want. So I apologize for that. There we go. So lists are iterable, but more importantly, generator expressions are iterable. So we can provide kind of dynamically generated queries in, and those will still work. So those are both iterables. Let's there we go. So now, if we provide a mapping, then I'm going to call aggregate on and I'm going to call aggregate on the collection. So first I have to look up the collection. And so I can do that. I've stored away the database, the client actually, here. When the document is instantiated, it has to pass in a database as a second parameter. Not super happy with that. I mentioned that last week, but it'll do for the moment. I'm letting this library kind of organically build, so that I can get a feel for how it feels to use. I'm very much trying to think about how it feels to use it rather than the low-level implementation details, even if I am spending most of my time in the low-level implementation details. So in this case, ob is the containing object. I can get hold of the database here. I can then call get collection. See, auto completion is now really working for me, which is nice. So then I want the superset collection. So the one thing that's worth noting, and this is more a preference thing than anything else, is that I could just a database object. I can look up collections by name. So I could actually, there's a few ways I can do it as an array lookup. So I could do superset collection here. Or if I actually had if I knew the name of the collection, I could call it followers. And those all work, but that gives me a collection object. But I find calling get collection explicitly means that the type detection in this is VS Code, but also PyCharm, it tends to work better because it knows that the get collection method returns a collection object, and then it's going to help autocomplete there. So these things get better all the time. It's sort of working out what heuristically sort of what the returned object is from some of these dynamic methods. But this has worked for me more consistently than other techniques. So I'm going to call get collection, and then if it's a mapping, then I'm going to call find. I could do some other stuff here. I should probably have a project parameter as well, like all the things that can be passed to find, but let's not worry about that too much because that can be handled by passing in an aggregation, which is really what I'm thinking, how this is going to be used most of the time. So if the query is a mapping, I can just pass it in. Let's just copy paste. Well, I got into trouble with copy pasting last week. I think that was the real cause of the problem that I had. So let's hope that doesn't happen this time. Right. So that returns superset. As I said, this is a cursor. This is a lazy iterable. So I can just pass that into chain directly, which I've done here. I'm going to do the same with aggregate. I haven't actually prototyped this code before, so it's going to be interesting to see how many mistakes I make on the way to getting this working. So there we go. I think that's my basic implementation. Like this, the rest is really sort of testing it, and I hope so. Anyway, testing it and debugging it. So let's write a test. Here we go. Test.bridge. I have a test for sequences, and I'm gonna write another test. I think. Ooh, look at that. Did I? Test sequence field. So that was just testing the low level stuff. Oh no, this is inside the test. Okay, cool. So this is more or less going to be the same. Oh no, it's not, because I'm not going to work with the sample profile. I am actually going to use the functionality that I built a couple of weeks ago. So if you weren't here, I wrote a couple of fixtures. One configures a client object using an environment variable, which I have set. And then the other one creates a rollback session, which it returns you the session, and then which you can use in your queries. And then at the end of your test, it will abort the transaction. So it essentially rolls back any changes and keeps your database clean, which is nice. So let me stick that in the test, MongoDB, and the other one is rollback session. You know, once I worked out that PyTest was just going to magically pass in these fixtures. I quite like them, but it is like the first time I followed the instructions, I was just thinking, what is going on here? Like, where are these fixtures coming from? I didn't realize it was just sort of name-based dependency injection. But that's fine. That's fine. So I've got my, let's model the profile and the follower. Oh, I've just seen one thing that I haven't implemented, but let's wait until we get there. So I've got my profile, my follower. I'm gonna, and then Monug, MongoDB. Now, this is expected to be a database, but MongoDB is actually a client. So I'm going to have to look up my PyMongo documentation because there's a way to get the default database. Now, you know what? At the moment, I'm going to hard code it. So my database is called Y. We were looking at it shortly, a little while ago. And then, so I'm going to pass that in. In fact, let's just create a variable for that so that I can reuse it. I don't have a sample profile. Okay, so I'm going to have to look up a profile. I can do that with db.get collection profiles.find one. User ID is 4. That's the one. Oops. And 4 is a string. Don't know quite why I did that. I think maybe because I was going to show cleaning up data. So I can look up that. Hopefully, let's just assert that I have a profile. Assert profile.user ID equals 4. Let's just check some other data from the actual underlying object. Oh, I'm in the wrong collection. So I have a look in profiles. Profiles 4. Let's check that full name equals Deborah White. I haven't run the tests today. Let's see what happens. Whoa, fail. And there we go. Like I've got a bug in my code. So itertools chain object is not subscriptable. Right. So this is because I've added a I've changed the way that followers works. Followers was a sequence, which means that you can look things up by index. Now it's an iterable, so you can't do that. I haven't quite decided how I'm going to deal with this difference because I did think about it, but at the moment I'm just going to assume that it's an iterable, and then we can call next on it, and then hopefully that will return the first item. And there we go, still failing. So. If not self-strict, then key error name. These are tests I wrote before. Like, why are these tests not working? I've seen Anshay has a love-hate relationship with PyTest fixtures as well. It's like, I like magic when it's hidden away. That sounds bad. I like things like Django's models where you configure them in a certain way, and then they just behave like objects. You don't really know that they're doing magic under the hood unless you need to do something specific, and then you read the documentation and work out how to change them. But this just feels like you've got these magic variables coming from nowhere, and I don't love that, I'm going to admit. It does work really well, though. So that's the love side of it. It works really well. And, if you looked at these fixtures, like the fact that the rollback session takes a different fixture as a parameter. So it gets its client from this fixture that has a different scope. And it's just like, this is actually really composable like this. It's very clever. I couldn't have come up with it myself. But it does work really well. So where am I looking up? Name. This is test.bridge52. Let's have a look. Oh, there's an old one. Why don't I have a name? So this is a fall through. Oh, I've got 2 cocktail definitions here. I wonder if I don't know why that ended up there, but let's see if this passes. There we go. And that's slightly frightening because that means this test actually worked. So let's see. I never trust a test that works first time. So let's make it fail. There we go. It is actually working. Okay, nice. So now I suppose I'm gonna get the first 20 items. I'm trying to think what the best way to do that is. I could do an iSlice, I suppose. Yeah, let's do that. So I'm going to need iter-tools again. Love iter-tools. Might be being too clever now. From iter-tools import iSlice. iSlice just implements what you'd normally do with array slicing, but on iterables. So it'll actually repeatedly call next behind the scenes until it gets to the subset of data that you're asking for. It's quite a handy thing when dealing with these sort of lazy iterables like we are. And what I'm going to want to do is just kind of, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the 20th item. So let's just actually do that. So profile dot followers. Yes. So iSlice. I'm going to get the 20th, which will be the last embedded one. So that start is 20. Or is that 19? It's 19. And then I'm going to say and stop at 21. So that gives me 19 and 20. And then I can just call next twice on this. So I'm going to call it boundary, follow a boundary. This is where it's all going to fall apart, but hopefully in a predictable way. Let's get the first one. So last embed equals follow a boundary. Oops, I meant to wrap that with a next. And then we can just test that it is the last item in that array. Assert last embed. You know what? I didn't actually need the rollback session here because I'm not going to make any changes to the data. So might as well make this a little bit simpler. Last embed. And I'm just going to check the. Let's go and have a look at the data and see what we can get. So I've got these followers here. Item 19. Yeah, so it's N Brown. So let's just check the username. Oops. My escape key's not working anymore again. So username. Let's just test that. That's what tests are for. Ooh, okay. So this is actually the bit that we may be. So this is a related follower rather than embedded follower. So next, follow a boundary. Now, this is going to fail in a Oh, yeah, this is going to fail in a couple of ways because I haven't actually taught it how to look up the remaining items. But that's good. That's what tests are for. First related equals next. Oh, not next. Sorry. Dot user name. So let's have a look at the related data. Followers. My first item here, the username is Hooper Christopher. Nice. So this is going to fail. Obviously, I'm going to get a stop iteration because there weren't any extra items. So to get extra items, when configuring this, that's quite interesting, actually. Yeah. Huh. So there's some dynamic data that needs to be injected into this query. So type equals follower, and then this was superset collection equals followers, and superset query equals. Now, this is an aggregation. You'll see why in a minute, if you haven't already worked it out. So I need some data from my follower. I don't actually. I need to get some data injected into this from the instance. So at the moment, I'm defining the class, and this needs to be 4. So let me put that in as 4 at the moment, and then I'll replace it with something dynamic in a minute, because there's a few ways of doing this, and so I just need to work out like what the best way to do that is. Yeah, well, as I said, like we've got to see how it feels before we can kind of, before we know whether we're moving in the right direction or not. So I got my query there. It just does a match, which is basically the same as a find. And then I'm putting in some static data. So this will only work for a single profile at the moment, which is this one. And match isn't going to work because I haven't got a subdocument. So, oops, silly mistakes. Yeah, I think that's right. And this is user ID 4. So it's basically the same as this find expression, except now I'm looking it up in followers instead. So, PyTest. Okay. No, we've got stop iteration again. What happened? Interesting. Why do we get that? So it's almost like it's not adding the query on afterwards. Oh, it is the string 4 as well. Yeah, thank you, Angé. You really pay attention. Been very impressed. Yes. So it doesn't have a username. I wish I hadn't done this as a string. I know why I did it, but it keeps catching me out. It nearly caught me out earlier. So the reason that's not working is because it's right. Because I've paged the followers. The followers is an array inside a document, so it has a user ID, but it doesn't have a username because the username actually belongs to the individual follower. So what I need to do, let's go to aggregations. I've got this plugin for VS Code, which is from MongoDB. We have this lovely leaf logo here. You can download this through the normal package VS Code plugin repository. It's pretty awesome. It's and there's a couple of things it provides. The first is a way to configure database connections. So I have a database connection here I called it episode 3. I used it last week, so I should rename that to episode 4. And then it shows me all the databases that I'm connected to at this in this cluster. And then so there's my Y collection. We were doing this in web interface before, but I can easily kind of look stuff up here. It's not the best browsing interface because we're a bit limited as to what we can show in here, but you can see that I can click on a user ID. There we go. There's our collection here. And we can kind of look at our data. So that's quite nice, but that's not really what I use this for. What I use it for is Playgrounds. So Playgrounds allows you to just generate a JavaScript file containing, it's a bit like Mongosh, but in a text editor, which I really like. And then you can just build up your queries here. And then once you've got your query built, I can hit play and it will show me the results on the right-hand side. So it is JavaScript, sadly. I'll say sadly. It's good for JavaScript developers. Just I kind of prefer Python personally, but it does allow me to run a query and see the results on the right-hand side. It's a really powerful tool, actually. So I got my find expression here. That gets me my profile. If I then look up in followers, let's do this as the aggregation. Aggregate. Oh, and and match user ID string for. This is the query that we're just running. So let's see the result. Oops. There is a shortcut to running this, but I can never remember what it is. And it allows me to think while I move my cursor up to the play button. So here we go, and it's expanded the followers here. What I want to do is, instead of having multiple documents, multiple followers in one document, I kind of want one document per follower. And there's a really easy aggregation command for that, which is unwind. So if I just unwind, how do I do this? This is, yes, it just takes the field that you want to unwind on, or an expression. So I can put followers in here. I think that's right. And then stick a comma there because I like commas. Pipeline stage specific. Oh, excuse me. Bing. I have put this inside the other stage instead of after it. There we go. So now this is our top level. This is one doc. Each of these brackets, the purple brackets, is a document, and this document has the same ID as it did before, but now followers only has one follower in it, and then the second follower comes in another duplicated document. So you'll notice this has the same top level ID. It's DDD0, and then for the first 20 of these, they'll each have the same ID, but they each have one of the followers from that array. So it's kind of a handy way of exploding an array into multiple documents. But again, that's not quite what I want. I want this to match the format of my followers subarray. You know, I want each document to match one item from that embedded array, and so I need to take this followers object and promote it to the top level. So let me take this, and it's replace root is the command. It's kind of, there's a reason for this. Like, you can't refer to the containing object. Like I've got an expression to refer to the top level field followers, but I can't go one level up from that. And so that's why we have a special command for sort of swapping out the top level object. And then I think this, yes, this takes root. I think, was it new root? Could be new root. Let me just check the documentation before we go any further. New root. There we go. New root, and then I think this is just the name of the field. Sometimes difficult to remember whether you're using field name or an expression. So dict object has no attribute. No, this is pipe. That wasn't. Did I press play? Caused by new root expression. It should be an expression. So this should be dollar followers as well. There we go. So one document, one follower, one document, one follower. So this query now kind of matches the embedded data, and it hides the fact that this stuff is paged. It's it's stored with a page of 20 followers in a single document. So that's kind of, we can provide some of the abstraction in the query that we're running. This is really why I'm building my document mapper on documents and not first MongoDB. I'm sort of adding in more MongoDB later rather than earlier, because documents are the results of queries. They're not necessarily what's stored in the database. And so you sort of want a document to map to a document that comes back from a query. And so, yeah, it's sort of a shared responsibility when you're abstracting over these things to do some of it in the query and some of it in the object. And I'm trying to encapsulate the query part inside the object definition. That's really sort of the purpose of this whole experiment in building an ODM. So I've got my query here. I'm going to paste it in because these things often work quite well in Python when you come from JavaScript. Let me go back to my files. I've got my test.bridge. Oh, 50. It's 10 minutes to 3. I'm not sure I'm going to get this done in this session, and I really thought I would. So I've got my aggregation pipeline here. So again, I've got my query, I've got my unwind, and then I just didn't put quotes around here because I was doing lazy JavaScript. And yeah, let's try that now. Okay. And now we come to the thing that I realized when I said there was part of it that I haven't implemented, that I'd forgotten about. If I print first related, so this is meant to be a follower object. It's not going to be a follower object. It's going to be a BSON object, because this is just what's returned from the cursor. So what I need is a generator that does the wrapping of the cursor, much like we had a generator that wrapped each individual item in the embedded array. So hopefully this is really kind of just adding a generator expression to the, there we go, to here. I think I'm gonna put it here, because then we only have to implement it once. Whoops. So self._type item for item in superset. And this is lazy. I've seen, put round brackets around that. So this makes this a generator rather than a list comprehension. So that means that if I never call next on this, none of this will ever be executed. So nothing will be called on the superset, like query object or the empty list that could be. Now, hopefully, it didn't work. I thought it was going to work. Oh, that's right. There's a second item that it needs, which is ob.db, because we're now passing a database reference into each object, which I'm not super happy about, but I'll work on that. So that then implements the joins, which is, I think, 8 minutes to go. I'm quite pleased with that. There is obviously a really glaring flaw here, which is that this is static data. So this doesn't actually work. Like, this doesn't provide the functionality that I want. What I want this to do is maybe, so I mean, I could have an expression on here. I could call this, user ID, and I could pass that, and then an execution type. No, because that's too much. Like, I'm going to have to find these in my code. I could have a reference to a function on myself on this class, but that could be a little bit messy. So I could, for example, have def user ID self, and this would just return, because it's on the instance, it would return self dot. Actually, I think I can just do that, and then potentially. No, I'm just playing around here because I'm not going to implement this. I don't have time to implement this in the time that we've got left, but potentially I could have done this as like profile dot, and then I could call these. I could kind of go through my expression and call them where I find them, when they're not sort of strings. Yeah, gonna have to give this some thought. If anybody has some thoughts in the chat or afterwards, like, stick them in as an issue in the GitHub repo. There is a link to the GitHub repo in the description. While you're down there, feel free to like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this live stream. I'm really enjoying doing them. I enjoy kind of thinking through these problems, and I think there's some really interesting Python problems here and some really interesting query and data modeling stuff with MongoDB. And I also think there's some really interesting design issues around how you architect a library like this, how you put things together without like really binding them closely, or having a horrible API, or having making it a nightmare to garbage collect because you've got too many references to things. So I think there's still some problems to solve here. I think next week I will hopefully have a solution for this design, the sort of the field lookup on a class. there are a few approaches I could take to that. And the other thing that I want to start thinking about, but I don't know if I'll have a solution for it next week, is the fact that I'm storing these references to the database everywhere, and it's just a bit messy. But ways around this would be to use, say, a thread local, but that then becomes a little bit difficult when I want this library to work with async IO. Of course, that is another problem coming up, is that I'm very much gearing this to work with fast API. So I want this to work ideally in a synchronous and an asynchronous way. Sequence field, yeah, it could be a callable. Yes, sorry. Anjay's just suggested that sequence field could generate a query itself. You just pass the unwind field and the user ID as the lookup field. Pass the unwind field. Yeah, it needs to be a callable, doesn't it? So that it's lazy, so that it essentially calls it when there's an instance available. Oh, I see what you mean. Sequence field. I mean, you could subclass sequence field and implement the query generator. I mean, that would be one way to do it, is have the whole query generated and have this return either a dict or a list. But yeah, I'm going to give that some thought. Context vars. Yeah, I haven't really looked into them. Sorry, that was Patrick talking about context vars. I'll have a look. I mean, there has to be a way of abstracting around this problem. Like, I just want to get hold of a variable that's applicable in this current thread or in this current context. So yeah, I'm looking forward to solving that problem too. I think that would be an interesting problem to solve. So I hope you've been enjoying the live stream. I know I've got a few regulars on here, but they are friends of mine. So thank you for turning up, guys. But I know I've got a lot of people watching the recordings as well. We've seen this stream seems to be doing quite well and kind of picking up speed. So I'm planning to do some more. This is my last stream before Christmas. Although I will say some of my colleagues are solving advent of code with aggregation pipeline queries. So you can do a lot with aggregation pipelines. I honestly don't know if I'm clever enough, but if you would like to watch a middle-aged man struggle through advent of code in a query language, we could have a go at that next week as a sort of a Christmas bonus episode. If anybody's interested, do let me know in the comments whether you'd be interested in that. That could be kind of fun next Wednesday. Otherwise, I will see you in the new year. I wish everybody a good Christmas. And yeah, keep building cool things with MongoDB. It's I certainly plan to. Take care, everybody. Bye.